Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukhabhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. May all be happy. May no one suffer from diseases. May all see only goodness everywhere. May no one be subject to misery. May there be peace, abiding peace everywhere by God's grace. Good morning, friends. Or good evening, sorry. Good evening, friends. I am here to give a talk. And the subject of my talk is, what is divine grace? Before becoming a monk, I used to read Sri Ramakrishna's teachings and everything. And in one of his teachings he said, one who has not experienced God must not speak of God or talk about God. Eventually, by God's will, I had to join the Ramakrishna Order. And of course I thought I would never give a talk on God. But then the order asked me to give talks. So Sri Ramakrishna, after saying that one should not give talks unless one has experienced God, after that he modified his statement saying, unless ordered, unless ordered one should not. So I've been ordered to give talk. So that's why I have the approval of Sri Ramakrishna, who is a divine incarnation. And as our scriptures say, Uttishtata Jagrata Praipya Varan Nibodhata. Arise, awake. You are like somnambulist. You are like a somnambulist. You wake up, and after waking up, go to the superior ones, and with their help, become spiritually enlightened. Spiritual enlightenment means knowing divinity. That's what our scriptures teach. To know what is divine grace, therefore, we have to depend on the superior ones. And who are the superior ones? The divine incarnations. They are the dream tigers. They wake us up. If you have a dream, in the dream world we are there and we think everything is all right. Someone comes to us and says, what you are seeing is the creation of your own mind. Then we will say, you don't know the truth. Nothing is my creation. Then suddenly a tiger appears and it is about to pounce on us. And then we wake up. The dream tiger is a part of our dream world, but it helps us to get rid of the dream world. So also this world which we experience in the waking state, that is also another dream world. And who will wake us up? Dream tigers. So the divine incarnations are the dream tigers. They are the superior ones. With their help we have to wake up. So let me refer to them to know what is God's grace. Well, the dictionary meaning of the word God's grace is this, some special favor of God. Special favor of God is God's grace. but is God one who doesn't want to grant peace to everybody or give his favor to everybody? The answer is no. God's grace is impartial. Impartial, and it is not partial. Sri Ramakrishna, divine incarnation, he is a dream tiger. He is saying that God's grace is not conditional. Any conditional gift cannot be called real grace. God showers His impartial grace on everyone, either good or bad. And those who are good use God's grace for good purposes, and those who are wicked, they use God's grace for bad purposes. So an example has been given. A candle is burning, casting light. So there are two persons sitting close to the candle. One person is reading a holy book with the help of the light of the candle, and another person is forging dollar bills with the light of the same candle. So one of them will become a saint and the other one will go to jail. So according to Sri Ramakrishna, this light cast by the candle is God's grace. And one has to use that light for a good purpose. And what is good is unselfish. Unselfishness is goodness. And anything that is selfish is not good. We have to be careful about that. Why do you need God's grace? We need God's grace in order to become free from the bondage of this world, this dream world. We want to become awake. And once we become awake, we get to know that everything is divinity. We are like so many waves in the ocean of divinity. As long as we are identified with our forms, we think we are waves. So we have to go beyond name and form. God is beyond name and form. We are identified with our mind. That's why the ego is a thought of a conscious mind. If I am my ego, that shows that my mind has that idea in it. Conscious mind. I. That is the ego. And as long as we are identified with our mind, if we don't remember that we are as the owner of that mind, I cannot be my mind. The owner and the object owned cannot be the same. So I am different from my mind. Therefore, I am different from my ego. So, this ego has to be got rid of. In other words, one's selfishness has to be abandoned. According to Sri Ramakrishna, every person is like the owner of a sailboat. And as long as the sails are up there, then the wind will drive it. The owner of the boatman won't have to row the boat. And this wind is compared to God's grace. If the boatman gives us his effort, that means he stops rowing the boat and he has put up the sail of his boat, then the boatman will be moved according to the direction of the wind. That means at that time it is God's grace which will do everything for him. Therefore one should give up selfishness and completely surrender to the will of God. In other words, when we give up our ego, we become nobody. And when that ego is gone, then one becomes one with divinity. The same divinity everywhere. And that divinity is the cause of our divine grace. Sri Ramakrishna could not use the word I. He would replace that I with this, pointing to his body. He would say, this did it, this said it. There is a story of a weaver. By surrendering to God and by giving up his false ego, he experienced divinity everywhere. He saw divinity in himself and the buyers who would come to buy the cloth woven by him, everything done by God. One day, a person came to Sri Ramakrishna and said to him, this is your shop. Sri Ramakrishna said, no, this is not my shop. This shop belongs to God. What is the price of your cloth? He said, the price of this cloth by God's grace is so much. He could feel God's grace everywhere. Sri Ramakrishna was in such a condition. He came to set examples for us. He is one of those dream tigers to help us wake up. He advised others who would come to him, replace your I with thou. Thou means God. It is not I, but God, it is you. You are doing everything. There are some people who think that people are responsible for whatever happens to them in the form of pleasure or pain. And what happens to them according to the doctrine of karma or action, it is the effect of the action of that person. But the effect is not something which is under the control of the doer. That is controlled by God. That's why God is said in Sanskrit, karma phaladata. Every action will produce some result, good or bad. But that result will come to the doer of such action. And once the action is performed, the effect of such action is there, but that is not under our control. That is under whose control? Our scriptures say that it is under the control of God. God is like the cashier in a bank. The cashier cannot give any money to the depositor other than his invested capital and its interest. Naturally, a question arises. What is then the scope of God's grace in Hinduism? The answer is God's grace is not conditional at all. Any conditional gift cannot be called real grace. God showers His impartial grace on everyone, good or bad. Those who are good use God's grace for good purposes, and the wicked use God's grace for bad purposes. Sri Sharada Devi is another divine incarnation. She came to teach us by her own life what divinity is. And she taught us that unconditional compassion is divinity. Parama prema rupa. Unconditional divinity. She used to say, I am the mother of the good and also the mother of the wicked. To her, all were the same. While she was in physical body, and she took her human form in India, and then eventually the Ramakrishna Order was formed by Swami Vivekananda, one of the main followers of Sri Ramakrishna. And there's monks were one day discussing one thing. It is India was under the rule of British government, and there were some people who would not like this, like being governed by some foreign country. So they wanted to become free, or they wanted to become independent. That's why independence movement was there in India. And those who would take part in such struggle for independence, the ruling British government would not tolerate them. They would be punished. And once one woman was involved in this freedom movement, and police came and arrested her. According to that ruling government, what she had been doing was not right. This news upset everyone, because in India, where most of the people follow Hinduism, their women are highly respected. They are supposed to be respected like mothers. While I was in India, as a monk, I would address all women there as mother, young or old. But here in this country, it cannot be done. When I came here, I addressed one Western woman as mother, and she was upset. Actually, she thought that what I said implied that she was not young anymore. I don't know. So, having noticed that, I stopped addressing women in this country as mothers. So this Sri Sarada Devi, the divine incarnation, came to teach the world the motherly compassion of God. She had nothing but compassion. And so when that woman involved in the freedom movement was arrested by the British police, then everybody was upset. And some of the monks of the Ramakrishna Order were showing their sadness at this event. And they were speaking against the British. Then Sri Sarada Devi was there. She overheard their complaint. And she said, but the British are also my children. Because she was the personification of divine compassion and love. Such love and compassion, that is an indication of divine grace. They are also my children, she said. She hated no one. I've already told you that Sri Ramakrishna could not use the word I, which means that he was identified with his mind. No, he was not. Therefore, he would replace it with this. This did that, this said that, that's how he would talk. By doing that, he was teaching us that ego should be got rid of. So one should give up selfishness and completely surrender to the will of divinity. So we have to become nobodies. This body-mind complex, we are not that. As the owners of our body-mind complex, we are different from them. What we all are is divinity. Sarvam Khalidam Brahma. Everything is divinity. That is taught by the scriptures of Hinduism. This is called Mahavakya, a great sentence. Tat Tamasi, you are that divinity. Aham Brahmasmi, I am also divinity. I am Atma Brahma. That what I consider my soul, that is also divinity. This is the highest teaching of the scriptures of Hinduism. And by divine grace, we have come to know all these things. because it is the divine incarnations who taught us. That's, the divine incarnations are compassion personified. Some stories about ancient divine incarnations are often distorted. In the life of Jesus Christ, we see that when he was on the cross, his body had been crucified. He had been going through extreme pain. But at that time, what was he doing? At that time, he was, out of compassion for everybody, he was saying about the tormentors, those who, God please forgive them, those people who are responsible for my crucifixion, please forgive them, because they do not know what they are doing. They are like so many children, babies, out of compassion. He also had nothing but compassion for all. There is a place where it is mentioned that he cursed a fig plant and the fig plant died. That, I think, is not what actually happened, because a divine incarnation does not curse anybody. A divine incarnation is compassion personified. So what is divine grace? Divine grace is that unconditional love of God. Ordinary people's love is based on reciprocity. I love you because you love me. But a divine incarnation's grace is not that way. Aside from that, when everything is divinity, there is no two there. And the Hindu scriptures say that God is ekam eva advitiyam, is one without a second. So at that stage the question of divine grace does not arise. Only divinity. It's a wonderful idea. We are all divine. We are all divinity. We have to remember that always. And as we are divinity, we have to be compassionate. And our ego should be mentally abandoned. We have to be egoless. Thank you all so much for your patience.